Hello, welcome to Noontime Chats. I'm Priscilla Robinson, and today I will hopefully be giving you some inspiration and some information to help you grow delicious containers for you, the home gardener. The 10-Minute University Noontime Chat. Whoopsie. There we go. The program is presented by the Clackamas County Master Gardener Association 10-Minute University in collaboration with and in support of the OSU Extension Service Master Gardener Program. Please stay tuned to the chat box as Sean will post links and resources. And questions should go into the Q&A box where Cheryl, my co-host, will type in answers. And then after the presentation, we'll have a live Q&A session. Remember, there's no silly questions. We hope you enjoy today's webinar. I'll focus on utilizing an alternative landscaping concept, edible landscaping, in containers. And please explore the many resources of 10-Minute University, including the videos and over 50 handouts. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover what to do if your space is limited and you still want to beautify your home with edibles. This is the webinar for you. In a container garden, you have the opportunity to create little worlds, and each pot, whether large or small, offers beauty and something else. A snack, a pop of fresh herbs, or vibrant leafy veggies to be eaten raw or cooked. If your gardening space is limited, why not get the best bang for your buck and your time and effort with edible landscaping? Lastly, container gardening offers manageable maintenance for watering, weeding, and overall care. Think how easy it will be to weed from a raised container versus getting down on your hands and knees in the mud. Here's what we're going to cover today. So edible containers came to me pretty organically. We relocated from a home into a condominium, and so my growing space was very limited. I had a garden over in a community garden that I kind of grow in square-inch plots, and every once in a while I'd have an extra head of lettuce or some kale or some chard and various leafy greens that couldn't go in my garden. It'd be too crowded. So I'd bring them home and just pop them into pots. And as those leafy vegetables and greens developed, I discovered that it was really beautiful. And so then I became more pragmatic about how I put those leafy greens into those pots. So you really want to maximize your growing space for food and beauty. And I like to use leafy greens, vegetables, flowers, herbs, and even roots. And by the way, those leafy greens don't have to be green. The left photo features a Merlot lettuce, and on the right, the garden has vegetables with deep purple leaves and bright green veins, and they're just ready to be picked. And when you see leafy greens that aren't green, they actually have more nutrients and minerals in them. So why not get a lot out of your food? It's just gorgeous. And the Merlot lettuce is a little window box. So look at the curb appeal for people walking by. They might be curious about your gardening. And when establishing the plants in a container, think about what you might want to use in your cuisine. I really appreciate sugar snap peas in the spring for their flowers, their tendrils, and then of course their pods. And in this container, I'm letting the peas wander and cascade down rather than a traditional fence method that you might see in a raised garden bed or even on a farm. And how many of you have been eating flowers? I bet you have. Chances are you've had some of these flowers, but have you tried herb blossoms or even dandelions or pea tendrils? There are thousands of possibilities. And when my kale bolts and produces gorgeous yellow flowers, well, I just snip that off and bring it home, and I top my stir fry with some blossoms or make a little fancy appetizer on the weekend. A traditional pot of herbs is also an edible container. Are you growing that at home? Well, by utilizing a variety of textures and colors, you've achieved success. And ounce for ounce, herbs are the most economically sound crops you can grow. All these herbs provide culinary delight for fresh or dried needs. Root vegetables also do well in containers, like these carrots. I really like the feathery leaves that it adds to a pot, a lot of texture and color and movement. You know, they sway in the breeze. It really is very pretty. The greens can actually be harvested and made into a nice little chimichurri sauce. And those short, stubby carrots, they're called atlas. And they work really well in your container, especially if it isn't too deep. Try it. So this edible landscaping is really dual purpose landscaping. And a variety of leafy vegetables, herbs, and gorgeous plants can sit out on your patio, and you can feel proud of that. They're beautiful and they're delicious. Notice the care in which the two varieties of lettuce were planted for a vibrant design. A simple triangular planting pattern makes a big visual impact. Thinning and harvesting is needed for the plant as they start to get a little tight. You can either remove a whole head or you can snip off leaves from the outside. If you are going to remove that head, please don't pull it out. The other plants aren't going to be very happy because you'll be disturbing their root system. You want to take a nice sharp knife and slice it about an inch above the soil line and gently remove that head of lettuce. And you know what, if you get lucky and you continue to take care of it, you might get little tiny baby heads of lettuce that will come off of that stem. That's one of the nice things about carefully removing that head. And as a master gardener, the most frequent question I get at any sort of talk on vegetables is, what should I plant? And this is your answer. Each of these pots has vegetables, herbs, and flowers, and springtime is a perfect time to establish a container, perhaps close to your kitchen door for ease of snatching up fresh herbs or greens for your recipe. Plant what you like and eat what you plant. Another benefit is manageable maintenance. And I actually use a lot of mint in my cooking, but it's not something that I would plant in my raised beds over at the community garden. It's something that I definitely want to manage in a pot. It will contain those runners and keep me and the mint plant at peace. So how about containers? Maybe you have something at home you want to utilize. Maybe you want to establish a new little grouping. Let's look at containers. When purchasing and grouping containers, think color, texture, shape, and practicality. How are you going to move that thing? On the left, I like how the grouping allows for different sizes and textures of pots, but the color marries the group. And I also like how the red allows for a deep contrast between the yellow and green. We're looking at contrasting colors there. Galvanized water troughs have gained popularity for their sleek design and varieties of shapes and sizes. And you know, the drainage hole that comes with those water troughs is very practical for your drainage hole for your pot, for your container. It's right along the side. It's okay if your hole is either on the side of the container or underneath. If you've got holes underneath, you want to make sure that it has a little bit of a gap, at least a half an inch to an inch, so that you get good drainage out of those pots. And also think about how you want to arrange them. I really love the gray pots. They look great together. I like how the steps of the deck have been utilized to give some height. Look at that obelisk. It adds a lot of interest to the design, but look closely. There is a squash plant or maybe a cucumber plant being grown vertically in that obelisk. Dual purposing again. Also notice how there's some nice spacing between the plants so that they have room to grow and develop. I could see that squash, or maybe it's a pumpkin growing out of the gray pot and cascading down those steps. The container arrangements with the gray and black pots creates a nice neutral palette that emphasizes the beauty of the flowers and the vegetables. And like I said, repurpose or reuse what you have. This old wheelbarrow already had holes at its low point, so it had adequate drainage. This container can go from spring right into summer with nasturtiums and herbs that will go on a charcuterie board. So shopping for pots can be overwhelming. I like to take a picture of the space in my deck or my side yard or maybe my rooftop. Wherever those pots are going to go, I like to take a picture of that space. And I also like to get some measurements. And last year, my husband and I replaced the two pots at the top of our stairs going into our front door. I measured the distance to the bottom of that window where the windowsill was, and I made sure that my new pots were going to come up to that windowsill, because now when people approach the front door, they get really pretty flowers coming in, and I get really pretty flowers when I look out the front window. So think about their size. Don't estimate. You know, I like to bring my tape measure with me to the store or pay close attention to those online sites for size. And when reworking this webinar, I wanted to add something new. So who knew about fabric grow bags? I guess they've been around for a while, but they're gaining in popularity and acceptance for a number of reasons. One reason is the science of root air pruning. Also, the ease of moving the bags with handles on each side. Get a buddy and you can really move a big one. And also the flexibility of storing those grow bags during your off season. Clean them out, let them dry, fold them up. They can be put away into a bin. As the grow bags have gained popularity, so has the number of colors that they come in, the size and the shapes. It allows for a lot of versatility, and urban gardeners are really catching on to this type of gardening. They're using a limited amount of space and getting good produce. The fabric grow bags can be purchased online at garden centers, or they can even be homemade. Kevin Espertu, the author of Grow Bag Gardening, embraces it and remarks grow bags are one of my favorite methods for creative, small space, edible gardening. Sounds like it's a plan. Commercial grow bags are made out of plasticized fabric like polyethylene and are often made from recycled plastic milk jugs. The chart on the right has a list of the pros and the cons that I've found while researching this topic. As you can see, you take good and bad. One thing that I really liked was overwatering is less likely. That's probably one of the biggest reasons some plants die. They've just been loved too much with too much water. And with these grow bags, it will naturally drain and allow the plant not to come to that problem. And they can be really versatile. You can keep them in one place, like that photo of the grow bags with a fence for the hops to climb up. I hope that's a really tall fence because hops grow really tall. And they can also be moved around from season to season. For example, if you've got lettuce out in the spring, you might want to take that bag and move it to perhaps an area that gets less sun so that your lettuce doesn't get scalded and burnt in the heat of the summer. And as I mentioned, grow bags have a benefit that help to promote bigger harvests, and that's keeping the roots healthy. So let's think about plants and how they evolved to grow. They were evolved to be in the ground and to have an unlimited space. The roots could just go out as far as they want, and that's how they made sure that they had enough oxygen, nutrients, and water. But in a standard container, like a plastic one or a ceramic pot, the space is limited. And when a plant's root system reaches the edge of the container, it hits pockets of nutrient-rich water and it continues to grow. But there's really nowhere for it to go. So the roots continue to grow and circle, eventually forming a pot or root-bound plant. I think many of us are familiar with that term. And these encircled root systems are very inefficient in getting the oxygen, water, and precious nutrients, and they often die a slow death, and the production of vegetables really goes down. The grow bag is made of a porous material, and when the plants reach the edge of the grow bag, those roots encounter an air-rich environment that is low in water and nutrients, and this caused the tips of the roots to die back. That sounds like a bad thing. However, that dying back is signaling the plant to produce new roots elsewhere in that root system, and they are closer to the stem and are really going to help the plant use that space in the grow bag. And Julia Walker, a researcher at Washington State University, looked at root air pruning, and she stated, if roots are not exposed to air, they continue to grow around the container in a constricted pattern. The roots may spiral, twist, kink, or become strangled. Many of us have experienced that, haven't we? So maybe root bags are something that, grow bags are something you could use. I could see a real practical application with a tomato. Tomatoes grow a huge root system, and we even plant tomatoes deep so that we can get more root system. And I think that the grow bag would encourage a nice, healthy root system for tomatoes. Okay, let's take a look at the care and maintenance of our containers. So sun is the energy that causes the plants to grow and thrive. And so even though you might have a specific spot you want to put these containers, it's probably important to take some time to do a little bit of research and see how the sun moves in your yard. And if you have a particular spot, you might want to count the number of hours that you do get sun in that spot. And so the orange area shows shadows. You want to look at how shadows are cast by perhaps trees in your yard, your house, your garage, shed, and fences. People often plant up against a fence only to discover it's a very shady spot or a shady place to have your pots. So make observations. And remember, you're going to want at least 6 to 8 hours of sun for your containers. And if you don't have that, don't dismay, because there are lots of herbs that can do with partial sun. There are quite a few leafy vegetables that will continue to grow in that partial sun. We can go over those during the Q&A if you're interested in knowing more about that. Another important thing is plant spacing. And you want to consider the mature size of that plant. When I look at pictures of my little cherry tomato plant, which I plant after Mother's Day, and then I look at it again at Labor Day weekend, it's amazing, right? So think about how they're going to grow. And you can get that information from the plant labels, from the catalogs, or other sources, charts that we have here at OSU Extension Services. The photo on the right has some dinosaur kale in the center, which continues to grow up and the leaves will broaden. And this is not a bad thing because it may actually offer the lettuce varieties in this pot some shade and shelter from the sun and heat as the container transitions from spring to summer weather. Planting and spacing instructions are in seed catalogs and on online websites. Some of the apps are really detailed, telling you how many plants you can put in a certain amount of space, and that's really helpful. Remember when planting that your tallest plants need to go on the back side, or if it's against a wall, the back side, and the shortest plants go around the front or along the edges. And any plant that you're planning to let wander or spill out will need to be planted close to the edge so that it can go in that direction. So potting mixes have organic matter and minerals to provide a favorable foundation. It's an ideal growing medium to anchor the roots and nourish the plant. They're light and fluffy. You don't want things to compact in these containers. It's important to fully hydrate that bag of soil before you put it into the pot. And I actually stick the hose right in that bag of soil and mix it up until it's fully saturated. You can also do the same thing with a bucket or a watering can if it's not close to your hose. And let's see, then you're going to add that soil to your container. And again, add a slow release fertilizer to be incorporated, and make sure you get that fertilizer down deep. Think about where the roots are going to be. So you really want to give the plants the best possible growing and living environment. And so now, once that soil's in there, it's time to plant. And it's always interesting for new gardeners or children that they're just surprised it takes so many steps, planning and all of this before you actually get to do the planting. But all of that work is worth the rewards of the delicious and beautiful containers that you will have sitting out in your backyard. One recommendation that is made over and over again in all of the literature is that containers should have new soil each year, and to get rid of that old soil at the end of the year. It can be added to other existing garden beds in your yard, can be placed actually on top of the grass and raked in so that you continue to have good organic material in your lawns. Lots of options to take care of that soil. And if you're reusing pots, you really want to disinfect them at the beginning of the season. 1 cup of bleach to about 9 cups of water, and wash them out and rinse them thoroughly, let them dry in the sun. So care and maintenance of plants is also referred to as your cultural practices. That means watering, regular harvesting, plant attention, trimming, deadheading, thinning, succession planting, weeding, and also integrated pest management. Regular watering is important. And remember, some of your containers may be under the roof eave or on a covered porch and will not benefit from any rains. To test your soil moisture, dig down into the root area, not just the top inch, but go down 3, 4, 5 inches along the edge and make sure that your container is being deeply watered. That's what you want. It's better to deeply water once a day than lots of little sprinkling. Containers could also be set up with a drip system or soaker hoses, depending on where your spigot is. So that's another option. But when it comes to gardening and plant maintenance, I really try to involve all my family in the household. And my 15-month-old granddaughter, Emma, all she needed was a step stool and an invitation. And she was eager to water the flowers. Don't ever underestimate the simple joys the young and the old can get from helping with the garden chores. Involve them. Consistently picking the outer leaves from the Swiss chard, blossoms from the pansies, or peas will urge the plant to continue to grow. I see this a lot in gardens where they grow, and then the plants aren't harvested. And the whole goal of this plant is to produce more seeds. And so if you don't harvest on a regular basis, it will go to flower and then it will go to seed. And people often ask me that, why is it going to seed? And so you just need to keep harvesting, and it will tell that plant, you're not ready for seeds yet. Removing dead and dying blossoms promotes more flowering on a flowering plant. Don't remove the flowers from your squash or tomato plants, because that's where your vegetable is going to come from. I once had a person ask me at a farmer's market how come she wasn't getting any squash, but she forgot she needed to leave that flower to be fertilized. When root vegetables on the left, you see a nice turnip growing there. When they start to get a little bit too crowded, then I will thin them and remove the one in the middle to promote the growth for the 2 outer turnips. Succession planting also is a good way to keep your plants growing and developing, and that means adding more seeds, perhaps radish or lettuce seeds, at about 2-week intervals, and just doing a little section at a time and not planting the whole thing. Otherwise, you're going to have radishes coming out of your ears. So succession planting is really a good idea. And by the way, thinning, when you thin lettuce, just eat it. Another option in your plants, as we saw in in your pots, as we saw in that nice pot with the variegated lettuce, is called intensive gardening. And that's putting the plants really close together. And that can be done for a period of time until they get too crowded. You have to thin them out. But what it does is it creates a canopy that covers the dirt, and therefore germination of weeds is not as prevalent. And I really searched this photo over and over, and down in that left-hand corner, can you see the little yellow circle? There's a little clover growing. So that's the only weed I could find in this pot. And so, you could put that clover out and you could eat it. Pests come in all shapes and sizes, and so using an integrated pest management is the way we like to do it with the Master Gardeners. And it starts with looking for clues. That's the first step. Always identify and monitor problems before acting and consider the least toxic approach first. So if you see slug slime, if you see slug damage, there's a good chance you have slugs. You can set out traps, or you can head out in the evening with your flashlight in hand, because that's when slugs are most active at night, and you can pick them off the plants. If you do choose to use some chemicals, we highly recommend that you follow the instructions very carefully and that you keep those pesticides out of the reach of children and out of the way of pets. But, in many instances, some of the plant damage, it's not a pest at all, but it could be a cultural practice, something that you're doing in the garden, or it could be weather. Like, we've had enough hail this spring, haven't we? And it does a lot of damage, and it sometimes can be misinterpreted as pest damage. Therefore, it's really important to look carefully at your plants on a regular basis, examine the soil around your plants, to look at color, all those types of things, and get a lot of clues. And if you still don't know, you can always contact our OSU Ask an Expert. You can email a picture and a problem, and they will do their best to help you either find a solution or ask for more information to help guide your pest problem. And another option is to really try and interrupt the cycle. So the cabbage moth is a problem on a lot of plants. And you'll notice that it goes from the moth laying its eggs. Well, if you can get rid of some of those eggs before the caterpillars emerge, then you're going to interrupt the damaging phase of that pest. Whiteflies can really make a mess of a crop, and you can use physical removal by shooting it with a high volume of water, pressure of water to knock them off. You can remove the infested leaves or flowers, whatever's on there. And then if the plant is just inundated, sometimes you just need to throw in the towel, pull that plant out to prevent it from going to your other crops in your pot. Birds and mammals can do a lot of damage quickly. Who hasn't had the deer wander by for a midnight snack? Barriers and nets are your best defense. And, with these raised containers, you've got a fighting chance against Peter Rabbit hopping into, if it's high enough, they're not going to be able to get up there to eat your lovely leafy greens. So let's look at some elements of design, because we really want these to be well planned. So Monet offered us different moods by varying colors in his paintings, and edible container gardens are excellent for adding splashes of colors to our outdoor living space. So what is the mood you're looking for? The colors you choose can deeply affect the feelings of that area. So if a patio is used for entertaining, it may benefit from the use of warm colors, like this yellow patty pan squash, or red cherry tomatoes underplanted with electric Swiss chard. Those are bright yellow oranges, and reds. They elicit excitement as well as the yummy vegetables. Otherwise, like a balcony where you tend to relax, sit down to read, you might want to go with cool colors and a nice eggplant or Russian kale. Or how about some periwinkle lobelia that is going to cascade over the side? They all offer coolness on a nice hot day. In contrast, choosing many different colors can make a container look very busy. That might be something you want. Try using contrasting colors like orange and blue, or purple and yellow, or red and green for a festive mood. So when you're putting your plants, here's one type of design pattern which, is pretty easy to follow. It's called the thriller, filler, spiller method. And the thriller is the largest and the most striking plant. The filler is a mid-sized plant with contrasting texture or colors. And then the spiller is a plant that trails down to increase interest and move your eye around the planter. Each of those can be varying in heights, shapes, textures, and colors. So in this pot, the thriller is the artichoke plant with dusty green leaves and plenty of texture. The artichokes can be harvested to eat, or you can allow that flower to go through all its phases and you'll have a beautiful purple flower coming out. Nice, lots of texture. It's really pretty. The fillers are pansies, variegated oak leaf lettuce, kale, and rainbow Swiss chard. They kind of hide that woody stem of the artichoke and provide a fullness in the design. And the spiller is a nice, healthy chive plant cascading down. Harvesting greens by the leaf or the removal of a whole plant can be done as space is needed or what's on the menu. Container designs can be dynamic as plants mature or are harvested. For example, the thriller in the original design with a black arrow is pointing back to the garlic. And as it develops those garlic scapes, it's going to be a really cool looking plant. You could also plant onions or other spiky types of vegetables. But then after harvesting the garlic, what happens to your thriller? Well, the red arrow is now pointing towards those bright orange peppers. They can be considered the thriller because of their showy color. And they'll also grow up and mature larger and larger. The filler, which the black arrow is pointing to, is romaine lettuce, the small pepper plants. And I could also see planting spinach in there as a filler. And these fillers really help to support and give a solid foundation for your design, fills things in. Lastly, the spiller is the sugar snap peas that are allowed to freestyle and cascade down. They also provide really pretty flowers, tendrils, and those bright green pods. They're very attractive and they're good to eat. So if you've got a container that is going to be seen by all 360 degrees, then you want to use this planting layout with the thriller in the middle, the fillers tucked up close to the thriller, and then lastly, those spillers out on the edges. It's surprising, they need to be fairly close to the edge, and you need to sometimes train them or encourage them over the edge. If your container is going to be up against a wall or perhaps a railing, then you want to place your thriller in the back of the pot or the container, and then a semicircle of your fillers up against the thriller, and then your spillers dispersed. You can see them, they're in purple here around the edge. So plant selection for a container is going to be a little bit different than if you're just doing a raised bed or if you're just doing regular vegetable gardening. You'll want to look for varieties that perhaps say patio on it. You'll want to look at how large they are at their mature size and what the spacing is. You'll also want to plant the same cultural needs together. So if there's a plant that needs a lot of sun, all those plants should go in that pot. And if there's ones that can use that partial sun area in your yard, you'll want to plant all of those together. So that's something in your plant selection. Always look for bright foliage, textures. And then lastly, plant something that you're going to want to eat. Let your imagination and creativity grow with you and your containers. So let's get serious. What do we want to plant in these beautiful and edible containers? Depending on where you are in our country, or perhaps where you are here in Oregon and your elevation, you may still be planting some cool crops. And they are root vegetables, coles, and leafy vegetables. And they can tolerate cooler air and soil temperatures for germination and plant health. Just a word to the wise, ornamental kales and cabbages do not taste very good. So if you're going to want to make an edible, beautiful container, make sure that you're getting perhaps a Russian kale or a Savoy cabbage. They're gorgeous with cool colors and curly textures. Bright lights, Swiss chard colors include red, yellow, magenta, and cream colored. And their green is such a nice deep green. I think you'll like that. If you are growing in containers, we actually can plant a little earlier in a container with our warm season crops because the soil is going to be a little bit warmer. And so those crops need warmer soil and air temperature to germinate and thrive. And some squash, cucumbers, tomato varieties do well with limited space. You can even use pole beans as long as you give them a something to grow on. So like a 5-gallon container with some bamboo poles will support the vines and the developing plant. And they can actually provide a nice, if you're trying to have some privacy, beans make a really neat privacy screen. So you can put it on the edge of your deck so that maybe your neighbors aren't looking down on you. Corn is another warm crop. And it does take a lot of space. So again, another 5-gallon container. It's going to be really fun to grow and see develop, but you're probably not going to have a huge productive crop. So if you want fun and interesting, plant corn. If you're looking to feed the family all summer with corn, corn is not your plant. So here are some more patio varieties by specific name. I'm not going to read it for you, but if you look back at this in the recording or you take a quick screenshot right now, these are some very popular varieties. And herbs in the Willamette Valley are pretty hardy in my containers. They grow all winter long. And they really thrive and get big in the summertime. And I harvest a lot of them, dry a lot of them so that I have them for later in the season and cut them back. But as I said, it's very economic, sound advice to plant herbs for return on your crop. And here are some edible hardy flowers that we can grow when it's really chilly and still have frost. They even survive in snow and hail. And then, of course, summer flowers are great. Rose petals are delicious. If you have roses in your planter, as the flower is starting to sort of open up and it's not going to be lasting longer, actually, it's really nice to trim off that rose and harvest those petals while they're still in a good edible state. Impatient flowers are incredibly sweet. They're very tasty. There's lots and lots of options for edible flowers. A lot of them can be the flowers that come off of other crops. Like I said earlier, if your kale bolts and you get flowers coming off of that, or even your broccoli, you can harvest those flowers and eat those. They're really tasty. And the tastiest part is the petals. And if you have plants that have stamens and stigmas, you'll definitely want to remove those. You can just snip them out with a little scissor before you put a whole flower on your salad or your appetizer. So there's lots of colorful homegrown goodness that you can get from your containers. These were meals that my husband and I helped to make. And on the right side, you'll see there's a variety of tomatoes. I can't wait for tomato season. And on the 25th of May, on the 18th, pretty soon, we'll have the part 3 on tomatoes. So staying safe is really important. And so remember, if you are going to use pesticides, you need to wait at least 10 to 12 days after applying that pesticide, and everything needs to be thoroughly washed so that you're not having that contamination. You also want to avoid possible food sensitivities. And as a rule of thumb, sample new plants in small amounts due to the possible food sensitivities and allergic reactions. The University of California, Berkeley, has an extensive paper on plants and the hazards and the range of possible reactions you might experience. Like major toxicity is like you have a serious illness and death and you better call 911 and poison control. Minor toxicity is the ingestion of the plant may cause a minor illness like vomiting or diarrhea. Still not very nice. So, small amounts. Oxalates is the juice or the sap of these plants, and they actually contain what are called oxalate crystals. And these can cause an irritation in your mouth, skin, tongue, and throat. So again, make sure that you are checking that the plants that and flowers that you are growing are really helpful or not harmful. Like sweet peas are flowers and you shouldn't eat those. You'd think peas are peas, but no. So, do your homework, your due diligence. The last type of problem that you might have with a new plant is dermatitis, and that's just a rash or an irritation. And if you start to experience that, wash your hands and any affected areas with soap and water. And this presentation involved using a lot of resources that we get from the OSU Extension Service. They have lots of science-based publications for everything in gardening. Check it out. And the resources include links for better understanding of edible flowers and staying away from the poisonous and the injurious plants that I just described. And the last little link is a description of how air pruning works on plants. And here are a few more safety resources and information for urban gardening and grow bags. They're all books that I use on a regular basis. But mostly I like to use our OSU extension publications because they're so well written, they're for the home gardener, they're easy to understand, and they're really helpful. And so now we will go live with some questions and answers, and let's welcome Cheryl.
Hello.
Hi.
I have to tell you that I loved the presentation. You know what I think is the greatest part about making attractive pots with edibles is that it's a perfect kitchen garden, and it can be right there on your front porch or on your patio, and you can just run out, snip some things, and put them in your dinner for the evening. It's great. So I loved every minute of it. It's very inspirational, and we do have some questions.
Oh, good.
Jesse is very ambitious. He wants to know if he can reuse a large plastic container that he got from the nursery that had a tree or a shrub in it at one time and grow blackberries in it.
Yes, the short answer is yes, you can use that container, and I think that we should repurpose these containers that we get. Make sure that when you are growing the blackberries that you give it some structure for growing and keep it pruned in the, at the right time. And I think we had a really wonderful webinar a couple weeks back on growing berries. So I would recommend going back to that. There's no reason why you can't reuse that pot.
Great. Okay, this is a soil question. This individual has a raised bed for growing vegetables and like stock tanks. And she realizes now that the soil she put in was basically just dirt and very low in organic materials. And she tries to grow without any chemicals, and she can add compost on a limited basis because the containers then fill up very quickly. She's wondering if there's recommendations on ways to add nutrients efficiently for heavy feeder crops like tomatoes and watermelons. This is a complicated question.
So I'm wondering, and maybe what this person who asked this question can add some supplemental question. I'm wondering how the drainage is with this regular soil that you've got in this container. Like we mentioned, we want it to be rather light and fluffy.
But not all compost. It needs to have some structure. So there's a balance.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No. In fact, compost and organic material only really takes up about 5% of the soil, right? And the rest is going to be air. 50% of it is air. So that's why I wondered about if it is draining, that would, if it's draining well, it's indicating that you've got good air in there, circulation.
Mm-hmm.
So my recommendation is to perhaps remove some of that soil, incorporate some container soil in that and get it all mixed up in there. The other option is to get in there with a nice garden fork and just loosen it up, go down 6 inches, not necessarily turn it over, but go down 6 inches and then add your prepared soil from a bag and then some compost.
Okay.
You have something to add to that? What do you think?
Right. I do have a couple of large containers like that are filled with soil, a combination of soil and compost. And I do put lime on it every fall when I'm ready to shut things down and let the rain, water kind of break it all down. And then when I plant tomatoes and I don't plant watermelons, but when I plant my tomatoes, I make sure I put a lot of bone meal and blood meal in the soil to enrich the soil, and it's, not a synthetic.
Yeah. And she can keep in mind that cucumbers and eggplant are also very heavy feeders.
Right.
And I was surprised. Peas, even though they have nitrogen fixing bacteria, they are heavy feeders. So you want to take care of those, as well as squash. So if people are planting any of those, make sure that you've got a nice
Some nutrients in there for those plants.
nutrients in there. And that can be in the form of a slow release nutrient, or by using those heavy feeders, you can also just add a water soluble watering, a supplemental watering to them, just those plants, because those are the ones that want it.
Here's a grow bag question, kind of a dual question. Do they dry out faster in the summer? And I think you alluded to that when you gave your presentation. And can they put grow bags inside another pot? So a pot within a pot.
Yes, they do dry out faster than a conventional pot, but they can be placed close to each other to help with that. Specifically, they said that you can put them right next to each other, like maybe you saw at the beginning when I introduced grow bags, they had all those red bags right next to each other. My one worry about putting a grow bag in a pot and hoping to have that air pruning is it definitely needs to have a gap in there.
Okay.
And perhaps lift it up off the bottom as well, so that you get that
space around
that space. So I would say that you're going to need to have a gap in there, but I think you could, and it might be a way to, utilize your pretty decorative pots and also utilize air pruning.
Okay, good answer. Do you have any tips for this individual? She grows French tarragon on the coast, and she wants to know how she can get it to come back next year.
I don't.
And I don't know French tarragon either. I would help with this answer, except I don't know French tarragon.
Yeah.
Most herbs that I've had I can prune down and they come back the next year generally, but I don't know tarragon, so I apologize. Don't know.
My resource that I have here, just real quick, indicates that it's wanting full sun. So I'm wondering, is your tarragon in full sun? And that tarragon is a heavy feeder. So you're going to need to keep this plant well fed year round if you want it to come back. So that is scientific information I can add to you, but I'm not sure exactly the particulars for helping it to grow year round. I guess keeping it protected, maybe row covers or something like that, maybe a little hoop house over it, but make sure that it's getting enough, a lot of sun and a lot of nutrients.
And this is another soil question. Potting soil can be very expensive, as we all know. Do I need to replace it every year in my pots? Can I remove and replace the top half? Can I reuse it at all? And we talked about that before the presentation.
We did. We knew we would get this question.
We knew we'd get this question.
The science is replace it so that you can then sanitize your pot and start new each year.
Yeah, we're talking about edibles here, so you want to be really safe that there's no pathogens that will be a problem.
Yeah, so I think our answer is you do want to replace it, maybe find a good place for that other soil.
Agree.
So you don't feel so bad about taking it out. And it is expensive, but homegrown vegetables and leafy greens and tomatoes, I mean, it's got some good value there.
You did give a good, on your list of plants for containers, you did list an eggplant variety, and this individual wanted to know if eggplants can be grown successfully in Portland. I'm guessing they're new to the area. So your answer is yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. You're definitely going to want to get a nice healthy start, and you're going to want to give it the hottest, warmest space it can have. But growing eggplants in containers is successful I've done it. You want a variety that is going to have lots of small eggplant and just continuously harvest those eggplants to encourage further flowering and plant production. But yes, we can grow. I've grown Italian varieties. I have grown Asian varieties. Both of them are beautiful to see develop, and both of them are delicious.
Delicious to eat. Okay, Margaret has a question. She says, if I put a systemic on my rose soil, can we still eat the rose petals? She's thinking about that for that little deadheading early addition to her salad or whatever.
I think the prudent answer is any pesticide that is applied to a plant is going to make its way into leaves, flowers, fruit.
I agree with you. Jean says, I have clay soil and have another house on the beach. I have compost to add to the small area I want to repair. I wonder if I can mix some sand also into the clay. Oh, we know the answer to this, right? Sand and clay, not such a great idea, right?
What do they make cement out of?
That's right, you just make cement, yeah. So
that yard is the perfect candidate for either raised beds or container growing. I mean, that's a nice hard, get it leveled off. Maybe put some gravel down there, maybe some weed cloth so you're not weeding through that, and put your containers on top of that. Or raise the level of that soil up.
Okay, here's an answer back from the gal who's got the compost issue on her raised beds. Drainage is fine, but it's not light and fluffy, pretty dense, but it drains. She thanks us for the suggestion. She's going to give them a try.
I really think getting a garden fork in there, I don't know how big this troughs vary in sizes. You might need a little step stool to get in there, but using a nice heavy duty garden fork and just going down, pushing forward about 30 degrees, and then pulling that out and just going in increments about every 5 to 6 inches. You're not going to ruin the soil structure. And by opening that up, you're allowing your compost to work its way down into that area that may seem a little dense.
Okay, I think you're right. And that is the last one of our questions. What a great presentation. Thanks for the great answers to the questions. And everybody stay tuned next week for Gardening with Wildlife.
Oh yeah, Gardening with Wildlife. I'll be co-hosting, so I'll see you there next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.